A mystery to solve, an episode intended to be a horror story brightened up with silly humor at a classic monster's expense, daft moments like ordinary Victorian humans not being able to see a Silurian underneath a transparent veil, Tom-Tom jokes. I must be talking about Doctor Who and the Crimson Horror. We're closing in on the end of this season now, and this week is Mark Gatiss' second contribution to this season, The Crimson Horror. Okay, I'm fairly certain this was intended to be this season's Doctor Light episode because the Doctor isn't introduced into the story until about halfway through, unless you count the image in the dead guy's eyes. I will admit that I did like how the Doctor was brought into the story. Right up until where his arm sticks out of the food door, I was expecting the Doctor and Clara to arrive about midway through the episode. So kudos for actually weaving the Doctor's arrival into the story and it actually making sense. Although the Doctor didn't make an appearance until halfway through, watching the first half felt like traditional Doctor Who to me. Many of the original series episodes didn't introduce the Doctor and his companion until about midway through the first episode of the serial. I think there may have been one or two occasions where the Doctor and his companion weren't even introduced until the second episode. The pacing wasn't rushed, the story unfolded fluently, there wasn't an overload of music, there wasn't a ton of shaky cam except near the end of the episode, and there was very little to no CGI. No romance between the Doctor and Clara. So in those respects, the episode wasn't too shabby. The title of this episode? Perfect! Now maybe some of you can see why I ran about episode titles. This one was called The Crimson Horror, which follows the format of most of the original series titles, and it describes the episode as a whole instead of referencing one specific element or the Doctor and his companions. Most of what I didn't like about this episode was very subtle, but it's all things that I've ranted about before. Judging from the title of this episode, this story was obviously intended to be traditional Gothic horror, similar to what many of the Tom Baker stories were during the Philip Hinchcliffe era. However, what troubles me the most about this episode is the same thing that troubled me about Hyde. Both of these stories, to my understanding, were supposed to be full-on terror and suspense. But just like Hyde, this episode has just a little bit of seasoning on top of romance and humor to keep things from getting too frightening. I can only conclude that the new Doctor Who does this for the little kids watching. Instead of having them go to bed at night worrying about kids wearing gas masks and weeping angels, or shadows, or clockwork droids hiding under their bed, they throw in a little silly humor to keep things from getting too scary. That's so silly! I can't decide if it's the BBC that are a bunch of fucking pussies or if it's the little kids watching now, because when I was these little kids' age, I was watching shows like The X-Files, Tales from the Dark Side, Blake Seven, Amazing Stories. The X-Files and Tales from the Dark Side used to give me nightmares. I couldn't go to sleep after watching an episode of The X-Files. Did I stop watching it? Hell no! It made me all the more anxious to tune in the following week. I didn't want to be patted on my back and told me that it's okay, the monster's not real, he's not dangerous, he just misses his lover. In this episode, it's in the form of Strax. Now, I've already ranted about how I hate the character of Strax in my Snowman review, but just to recap, alright, I know that the Sontarans are manufactured, I guess, for one purpose. Their never-ending war with the Rutans. Their war with the Rutans took precedence over anything else. If a Sontaran got separated from his regiment or his platoon or whatever, he would then make it his priority to rejoin the war. So why is Strax wasting his time with Vastra and Jenny? I know that when he was introduced in A Good Man Goes to War that he was serving some sort of a disciplinary sentence, which was basically him being demoted to the position of a nurse. Strax actually says something like it's the lowest, least respectable position for a Centauran or something like that, which is understandable. I mean, they're bred for war. But Strax says something that leads the audience to believe that the debt he was repaying was to the Doctor. And when the Doctor arrives to recruit him to go to Demon's Run, he claims that his debt has been repaid, that he's free. My problem with this is Sontarans are clones, and as such are mass-produced. So they don't hold any value to their own lives. Why do Sontarans need nurses? They aren't going to tend to their own sick and wounded, because why would they waste resources on that when they just pulled a fresh batch of new Sontarans out of the oven? That wasn't a baked potato joke, by the way. Sorry, Lynx. Ugh. It's obvious that Strax's character is only there to appeal to the kids watching, because he doesn't do anything productive for the entire episode except at the very end, where he magically scales the tower to save the Doctor and company. The Doctor kisses 3 different women in this episode. The Tom Tom joke? Another silly tidbit was where the guy kept passing out every time he saw an alien. What really makes it silly is that he doesn't actually pass out until Vastra lifts her veil. Fella, if you can't see through that transparent veil that she's a reptile, you really need to get a pair of these. Most of the episodes this season have fallen short in terms of a resolution. Either it was a quick fix, or it was rushed, or it just threw logic to the wind and solved everything with magic, causing the ending to make no sense whatsoever. However, with this episode, that didn't seem to be the case. The story was reasonably resolved within the context of the episode, and we didn't need the sonic screwdriver or the power of love. The best part of the whole damn thing is when Mr. Sweet gets squished like a bug. Finally, we killed a monster! Yay! Lastly, the final moments of this episode are perhaps the worst of all, because so little of it makes any logical sense. Clara once again returns home for no reason whatsoever. Why does she keep doing that? It gets worse whenever she walks into her house and discovers that someone has found pictures of her with the Doctor from her recent adventures with him. There's one of the submarine crew from Cold War, there's one from Hyde, and there's one of Clara in Victorian dress. Now, I should note that the photograph of Clara in Victorian dress is from London, not Yorkshire. So, that obviously is the snowman version of Clara. The 2 kids find out that Clara's a time traveler, blah blah blah. Okay, this is what doesn't make sense. The young boy claims that he found the pictures in some sort of history text. None of those events were significant historical occurrences. So why would a picture of the Doctor and Clara turn up in a history article about those time periods? Why is there even articles in history about these events? Hyde was in 1974. The only one worth mentioning is Cold War. But even then, why would the Doctor's little scrape with the Ice Warriors be relevant? If there's history articles about these events, why haven't they ever turned up before? Those kids sure found them pretty conveniently. I've already lost hope for next week because of the little kids tagging along. This episode wasn't too awful. 7 out of 10, I think that's fair. It would have been terrific if it hadn't had Strax in it. Sorry, Lynx. Ugh. If you like this review, be sure to subscribe to my channel. I post a new video every week reviewing the latest episodes of Doctor Who. You can also read all of my written reviews of all the new episodes of Doctor Who since Rose in my blog. In my blog, I basically compare the new episodes to the standards set by the original series. Here's the link. Be sure to like this video, share it with all of your Whovian buddies on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, StumbleUpon, wherever. The Crimson Aura. I know that when he was introduced in A Good Man Goes to War that he was serving some sort of a disciplinary, I'm going to have trouble with that word already.